Morena, and welcome to a Yarn Live. This is an inspiring woman leader session. So we've got special guest Rhiannon McKinnon here. Look at that big smile. Great to see you this morning. How are you?
I'm really well, thank you, Ryan. How are you?
Yes, good too. Thank you. So just a bit of context to everybody. Our Inspiring Woman Leaders series kicked off with International Women's Day when we had our first AFQI Women's event. And due to COVID, it had to be online. So we had about 80 to 90 women all sharing. And as a result, the commentary came back was, I'm going to go and do that now. I'm going to try this. And a whole range of people that were in the event decided to go off and do. So I was inspired myself to get more of these stories going. So we've had over the months, we've had Jolie and Justine from Spark, Yvonne Damon from NZ Police, Victoria Mahan, and a great list of women who are high achieving. And the aim is that your story, their stories, all the stories together, provide inspiration, especially to women, but to anybody, so that they can see stories of people that have achieved. And in this case, have another CEO. So we're going to have some great discussion around your journey to that and some of the intricacies around life. And we do get a lot of questions, and a couple of the regular ones I'll ask for them, around, how do you juggle the kids and the role? Probably a to be expected question, but everyone gets asked that. So with that, let's get, the last thing I just want to remind people of, I said to Rhiannon, this will be the first time in about 100 shows I've ever remembered to say it, is that sometimes I'm looking down. I'm not being rude to our lovely guest. I'm actually just putting timestamp comments in there so that you as a viewer can pop in and find any specific part of the show that might be of great interest to you. So now, with that, if I could ask you to introduce yourself, AFQI styles, Rhiannon, let's hear about the person, and then we'll get into the business discussion about being a CEO, a mum, and an amazing person, full stop.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Okay, so the style that you want. So my name is Rhiannon McKinnon, and thank you so much for having me today. I have been in New Zealand for about 14 and a half years. So I often call myself an import. My husband is a Kiwi, picked me up overseas and took me to Christchurch, where we turned up in 2007. And we spent 4 years there together. And in sort of early 2011, very shortly after the earthquake, actually, but not due to it, we moved up to Wellington, where the bulk of his family is based, and by which point we were married. We didn't have any children yet, but you thought that might be something that might happen to us, and I thought being near the grandparents was a reasonably wise idea. So we moved up to Wellington around then, and we've been here for the last 10 and a half years or so. So in that time, we've had 3 kids. The eldest is 8 next week. And then we've got a 6 and a 4-year-old sort of swiftly coming after that. And during that time, I've sort of been, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to talk about work at this stage, but I've been working at the broader New Zealand Post Group and Kiwi Bank, and sort of worming my way up some sort of corporate ladder. So that's been more successful than I ever thought could be. Yeah.
Well, hey, we're going to come back to that statement, be more successful than we thought it could be, because that's kind of the theme of why we exist in this Inspiring Women Leaders show. But we'll come back to that in a moment. So, you've talked about the husband, the kids, the grandparents moving to Wellington. If we go back in time a little bit, how long ago was it that you took on the CEO role, and how old were the kids at that point?
So that was only earlier this year. I took it on in late February. So the kids were all sort of probably minus 1 year. I think, as I said, my eldest is almost 8, so she was 7, 5, and 3 when I took it on. Yeah.
7, 5, and 3.
Yeah.
Crikey. That is, well, 7, 5, and 3 is a handful as it is, right? And on the reverse side, you got 3 kids. How many in the work family? How many staff, employees?
How many people at Kiwi Wealth? About 200. About 200. Oof. Yeah.
Yep. So I don't know if anyone's ever been in a management position. Some people might not be in a management position. I haven't been in a lot, but I do remember that when I moved from running clubs in the UK to get out of those long hours, and a bunch of other stories we'll leave for another day.
Yeah.
To run a pub, thinking 11 o'clock in the morning to 11 o'clock at night, it's going to be quiet, and I become the accountant, the lawyer, the manager, the babysitter, and that was of both the staff and the kids. And it becomes quite a thing where you start realizing that you are ultimately responsible for the care of these people to ensure that they can come to work and do a great job and be part of a team versus potentially going off the rails or whatnot. So yeah, you got a family of 203.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can have the fourth, my husband, but no, I remember there was a moment actually,
You might
like
count
very.
as two though, so depends what sort of husband he is. If he's like me, he might count as three.
He's not bad, actually. I hope he's not listening. I think some of his friends are. So no, I think there was a moment actually very shortly after I took the role on. There was a change in COVID alert levels, and I was at a dinner party, and I just didn't think about it at all, and I just carried on. And about after half an hour, I went and checked my phone and saw it was all it all lit up with like, how are we going to tell everybody and what are we going to do? And I was like, oh my goodness, this is actually my job now. On a Friday night at 11 p.m. or something. I was quite shocked by it, but yeah, I think I've got a little bit better at that now.
Yep. Well, I'm just sort of remembering actually how I discovered you, and it was actually reading a post, and I was walking our dog at the local school, Tairua School, which is just over here in Piatatu. And I actually remember I was walking through because I usually would read my phone and check LinkedIn on the walk to the school, because at the school we had to play ball, right, with the dog. He wouldn't have anything else. So I remember I was actually walking through the entranceway and the little garden they have at the entrance when I was reading, and I'm pretty sure it was Steve Jerkovich's post of an article about you taking on the role. And so I went, wow, you'd be an awesome candidate for Inspiring Women Leaders. So I think at that time, the article talked about you starting that role as part-time. And I thought that was another fantastic, because there's a whole range of what we'll call strings to the bow that we'll talk through that are really positive aspects for women to take on board, think about, and for everyone to, I guess, learn from as well. But you started off in the role as part-time, because I think you were part-time in the role prior. Tell us.
Yeah, so I was part-time in the role prior. I have to admit, I took on the role and I went to full-time because I didn't think that trying to be doing this role in 80% was actually believable. And so when I came back to working after babies 2 and 3, I went to sort of 60%. I was doing 3 days a week, and I have a couple of days at home with the kids, which was lovely. And when the eldest got to school, I decided to go to 4 days. So I was finding it a little bit frustrating. You couldn't get as much done at work as you really wanted to do because you weren't 60%. It's going at 60% of the pace. So I was actually quite excited to go to 80, and I'd love to still be there. Actually, I'd love to have that Friday back in my pocket, but I was just afraid that I was never going to get those Fridays off, and rather than get paid for a day off or not get paid for a day off I was never going to take, I'd rather sort of be officially full-time, which I am, but also sort of take the flexibility. And I still have lots of time blocked out in diaries for school pickups, or Friday morning last week I sort of spent the morning with my 4-year-old. He was taking me from one park to another and showing me the way and stuff, and I find that's great. And that you're picking up hours in the evening and stuff, and generally try and block out the weekends not to do any work, but I'm pretty sure I kind of deliver the full however many hours a week that I'm supposed to. But
well, I think the main thing is the I guess there might be some old school people who are hour counters, but the real thing, I guess, is about outcomes. But I just want to come back for the benefit of everybody when we were talking about this before we come on camera, and you used the phrase, "Oh, I've got to skive off." And before you explained to me what that was, I thought, oh, you can't say that. One of the big challenges before COVID was presenteeism. You can't really go and tell all your team that your presenteeism is quite high, and you're just like hanging out and doing whatever. And the reason I'm talking about this because your definition of skiving off was actually just having a bit of balance and picking up the kids, swapping hours around, etc. But it's the fact that this language exists in our vocabulary, in our thinking, in our mindset, potentially from days gone by. So, are there any moments through your career, your time, be it the last 6 months, the last 20 years, that some of this language has popped up before? That's been a bit of, might have been a bit more of a
back in the day when you would leave the office before sort of 5 o'clock, people would call you a part-timer, right? You left at 4 and people would call you like, oh, you part-timer. And that was, if you weren't doing the hours in the office from sort of 8:30 to 5:30, then you were seen as not really delivering. I mean, I think we've moved a long way since then. But I do definitely feel like if someone calls me and, I'm by the swimming pool because one of my daughters is at her swimming lesson, I still feel a twinge of guilt. So whether I should or shouldn't, I probably shouldn't. I do try and talk about it a lot at work as well and say, this is what I'm doing. Because I think, showing that the CE down can go off and spend time doing that flexible working, I think is important. But I'm also a little bit conscious that not everybody in my business can do that either. There are some people who are on sort of more shift work or more dedicated hours. So, most of the people can probably do that sort of flexi time, but not everybody can as well. So I'm conscious of that, and I get told off if I go too heavy on that because not everyone has the same benefit.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. I mean, that's a very conscientious approach, because you as the leader of 200 have got to look after all 200.
Yeah.
Some you want to encourage to make use of it, and the others that can't, I'm not sure what their roles might be, but it's obviously 24/7 critical type stuff. But there might be some other ways that they get their equivalent perk. Like my brother-in-law works for MAF, and they do 4 days on, 4 days off. So if he takes 4 days off, he actually gets an 8-week holiday.
Nice.
So perhaps there's some other
and I think it's about thinking it through for all the members of staff. So I mentioned obviously on that pre-live as well that we've looked at the 4-day week, and we kind of look at it versus we've got very, very flexible working practices, as many people do. But I do think it's real. I chatted to someone at the beginning of the year who was a working mum and said, what is your flexi time like? And I was, are you genuinely flexible? And I was just like, we're flexible to the point that it's almost odd to have the question now for us. And then when I keep sort of reiterating, yes, you can work from anywhere. There are some people who literally have moved to Wanganui because they felt that Wellington was too expensive. But it is, again, still a little bit role dependent. And so, again, we're sort of quite conscious that there are some roles that you probably do need to turn up in the office and meet people, especially if you're a people leader and manager. And there are other roles where we say, look, if you never show up in the office or you do it once a month, that's fine by us. But we just trust. I do think we have a very high trust environment in terms of, if you get the work done, I don't really care what times of the day you do it in.
Yeah. Although one of my team members was doing work at 2:00 in the morning and sending me the messages through LinkedIn chat as we do. And I have my phone beside my bed with the ringer on.
Pinging.
I have a couple of mates that, and you might do the same, where you have the phone on all the time. If they happen to call, you take that call and get up, right? So I had to let them know, because I'd only been started for a week. I said, would you mind if you message me in the morning? So I wake up with like what's going on? What's going on? Yeah. And then I go, oh, it's just work. But
no, I do a lot of delay delivery. So I try and be quite good about that. If I'm working in the evenings, I just think to myself, even though part of me is like, let's get it off. I try and press delay delivery on practically every email, as long as it does, you don't want someone working on it tonight. If you're not live working on some awful deadline for like board papers or something, then I delay them so that no one, it's awful to get an email from the CEO at 9 p.m. No one wants that.
Yeah. And there's two options here. One is you use a scheduler. So I have a scheduler from my HubSpot CRM that works beautifully. But when I'm actually working using a client device, and it doesn't have a scheduler, and I'm sending them, I put in I'm sending this email at my time. I don't expect you to read it till your time. But the thing that someone raised with me is it still makes a ding on my phone when you send it. And I was like, just like my 2 a.m. wake ups. So now I leave it sitting there, and when I wake up in the morning, I go to my drafts and go bang, 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 bang at 8:30 in the morning. But I'd love if I get a scheduler on both machines. That would be fun. But anyway,
I think a schedule is well worth it. I think, if I put those emails on, I used to have that kind of, signature that said I'm working out of hours, that expect you to reply. I still think you've got to be careful of your positional power, and that people are still going to think, one, it will have entered their mind and they'll be thinking about it overnight. So you've already ruined their evening. And secondly, there's going to be a huge temptation to reply to me sooner rather than later. So it's just better for it not to go.
Well, it's just like you talked about it. We were talking about going full time. You said I do flexible time, but even sometimes at moments I have feelings of guilt. So just like you, we're all human. Everyone will have those feelings. So it's pretty good topic to get out there and get amongst people's thinking. But let's bring it back to the woman aspect of the discussion, and
Yeah.
if we can talk about, when you took on the role, and maybe when you moved, especially to full time. Because what I'm thinking of is the mum versus the CEO. Those moments of feeling guilt. I had another guest on, not the Inspiring Woman show, but Te Omeka Mori, who talked about his fourth child and the guilt he had around work from home and school from home, and the dilemma between the two. So if you could, because I get asked this all the time by women who are about to have children, the questions that come through and the notes that come through in private, women who are about to have children and haven't been through it yet, women who are going through it and are potentially having some challenges. What sort of observations did you have? What findings? What advice? What's your take on it?
On the guilt in general, or any of it, or the juggle?
Parent and a leader at the same time. What? So
Yeah,
it could be any aspect of it.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, for those who are sort of about to embark on parenthood, I had a really good conversation with a lady called Carrie Hobson when I was like 7 months pregnant with my first child, and I was, really anxious about leaving the workforce for a period of time, and what does that going to mean for my career? And I remember her sort of saying that really, particularly for women's careers, but it should be for men's as well, that it is quite genuinely a marathon and not a sprint. And I think, this is a very personal opinion that's not substantiated by much, but I do think that men through their 30s and 40s have to work extremely hard. They actually suddenly often become sole breadwinner in the family. They're working really hard. They want to sort of bring home the bacon for the family. And there's a trajectory that I think a lot of men have to kind of go on, that through their 30s and early 40s, in order to be successful, which I don't think women necessarily have to subscribe to. It's a very fair thing to be off on maternity leave, off with your children for really not as long as you like. There'll be all sorts of other reasons you might need to get back to work, financial reasons and so forth. But that kind of career break in a CV for a woman is much more accepted. And so you do actually have a little bit more flexibility about how you want to run that, how many hours do I want to be in or out? So yes, you can feel really guilty, but I do think women, if they want to, can have a career into their 50s, 60s and 70s and don't need to kind of have achieved anything by any moment, and can keep changing what that looks like, or take more career turns. I actually think there's a bit more flexibility for women. So that gave me a lot of hope that I didn't have to get anywhere by any time, and that I could just take my time, and that everything would sort of, to a certain extent, be waiting for you on the other side. So that was really useful advice. I think in terms of like juggling kids, I mean, other advice I've had from amazing women, things like when they're really young, you can actually outsource more than you realize. That they've got very physical needs when they're little, and they will accept that if there's another babysitter doing all that kind of really high physical intensity needs for parenting, that's not so much of a problem. But I still have in the back of my mind the idea that, my kids, as I said, are reasonably young, what they are, 4, 6 and 7. There's going to be a stage as they get older that they probably need me more present. And so actually, I think, maybe I can have a good go at this CEO role. And after that, maybe I take another step back again. I don't feel it needs to be a linear, constantly sort of trying to strive upwards.
I like it. Thank
you.
So when we were talking earlier, I jokingly swung about my mum working and me being 45, or when she started in IT. And I just remember when I was a young fella, and I, what was it? Oh, yeah, my first week of my first job.
Yep.
And I come home and said to Dad, I said, because I was only 19, still at home, didn't go flat until I was 21. Come home and said, "Oh my God, my boss is a dick. You wouldn't believe what he did. He did this, 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 and this." And it actually wasn't a problem, really. It was just me and my lack of experience. I was an art director, and we had 6 art directors and 4 computers. So you had to design everything on paper first, get it signed off, and do it. And I had one thing wrong on paper, and I had to go and redraw the whole thing. Like, this is like an architectural diagram almost, and you got to draw it all exactly. So I had to go and redo the whole thing just for this one little bit that I could have easily just gone, get on the computer and produce it, right? This is in 1996. So my dad's advice, he said, and listen to these words carefully, "I'll give you the same advice my father gave me." And that is that everywhere you go, there's a dragon. So it's better the devil you know than the devil you don't. And you just put your head down, your bum up, and get on with work. And I was like, what? No way. And he said, yep. And the key thing there is that advice was probably given to his dad by his dad by his dad by his dad. And hence, we had this picture once upon a time that you got one job and you stayed at it and you could maybe progress in the company, right?
Yep.
So that's changed in the famous millennial discussion. And now we're seeing this next change, which is you can go up, you can go down, you can go sideways, you can go backwards, you can stop, you can have a sabbatical. There's, all the old rules are gone. We can actually get on and make a life that works for us.
I think so. I totally agree. And it's really interesting, I'm a very similar age to you. I'm 42. And I think it's really interesting being in the sort of kind of, am I in midlife? I probably am now, sort of in denial about that. But being sort of in between where you see people who are younger, who are sort of probably even more flexible and will, be driven much more by purpose than it might be than by pay or prestige. And then you're sort of dealing with people who are older, who don't really understand how a pay rise isn't the be all and end all to keep somebody at a job. And that's quite an interesting place to be in the middle there. And I think it hopefully can bridge both kind of cultures, because they're both still prevalent in the workforce, depending on what generation you are.
Yeah. So sorry, I just got slightly distracted for the first time ever, and I'm going to tackle this way. I hope you don't mind. But the show is being trolled with some distasteful comments, and I was just watching them pop up. So it's really sad. I'm not going to give the person airtime, but I'm just going to let you know that's what distracted me for a moment. I will clean them up. So if anyone's watching on YouTube, I will certainly be cleaning up those comments from that person. Very sad. Sorry for you. I won't use your name, but that's just very sad over there. And they're not terrible, but they're just wrong. So let's come back to really bringing it home about the amazing work that women are doing in leadership roles. It's a really important message to be getting across, especially not just because of the troll, but because that's what we're here to do, to really reinforce that it's all about capability and what can be achieved. So what will be some of the highlights since you've taken on the CEO position that you might like to share with us? And maybe they could include things that were something you thought wasn't going to come off but did, or just maybe something that went really smoothly but it was a really great achievement for the team. What are some of the highlights for you?
I think a couple of the highlights have been, we've had a couple of major projects that we've had to do at Kiwi Wealth. One of them finishes today, one of them sort of finishes tomorrow. So it's quite a busy time. And, they were both pretty big, audacious projects of completely different sort of, of completely different kind of skill sets and so forth. But I've really seen some incredible teams pull together and deliver some meaty things in some very, very tight timeframes. So it's been incredible to see the collaboration and seeing people work together, but also being quite conscious that, you get people to do incredible things together, but I do worry about the burnout on the other side as well. So some of those deadlines were immovable, but were probably too short, if you get what I mean. Like sometimes you've got external deadlines. So my team have been incredible. But, I'm conscious that you can't ask people to be doing this all the time. But that's sort of the spirit of the company has been incredible.
Yeah. Well, you've got I'm just trying to think of the three people's names. I'm pretty sure Craig Ward is the CTO.
Yeah.
CTO, and a lady who I think has a French name who's part of the tech team. And I'm just trying to remember
Renee? No.
Could be. I think it could be it. But three of your team came up to Auckland for another tech event.
Did they?
Yeah, this is going back. I'm just trying to think. It was October last year, or which gap it was between lockdowns. But they came on the night that AFQI was there. So they said, "Do you mind if we come?" I said, "Do I mind? I would love you to come. That's the whole thing. What it's all about." So you're talking about team putting in effort. They put in the extra effort, so a bit of a shout out to the team. Sorry, I can't remember all the 3 names, but I saw Craig Ward's face pop up just the other day, which reminded me. But yeah, they were going to another event, so they popped in. They made the effort to come across town, pop into AFQI, say hello, and then go back to the other event. So yeah, there's a little bit.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
that is really awesome. No, we've got a great tech team at Kiwi Wealth, and yeah, Craig Ward's been behind one of the product successes amongst everybody else who's done the work too. But yeah.
So if you were thinking back to your early days and read in the article, great article from Spinoff, among a couple of them out there, that you actually did a arts degree to enter into. Did you do it? I can't remember. I'm trying to read how it read, but did you? I think you identified that the intern program, you didn't need to have a financial degree. So did you do the arts degree because that's what you wanted to do, or did you do it because you were going to be different and stand out from the rest of the crowd when you went for the internship? Like, what was the thinking there?
I did it because I wanted to do it. So, I mean, I'd sort of been thinking about maybe pursuing a career in finance. My brother, I've got 2 older brothers. My middle brother was quite influential on sort of my thinking and so forth, because I sort of hero worshipped him through a large part of my childhood. But I've shaken that off now. But he sort of talked about these sorts of potential careers, and I thought, well, that sounds quite interesting. But I didn't really want to do a degree in economics or in mathematics. I mean, in the UK, they're all very kind of purist academic subjects that you do at some of those universities. But I worked out that they took people from all disciplines. So I decided to try, if I was going to spend 3 years doing a degree, I wanted to be in something that I actually found interesting. And so my degree is in history, which a lot of people would say doesn't sound very interesting, but actually it's all about how events sort of influence each other, and what does one thing lead to another, and how people interact and so forth. So actually it's, I think it gives you interesting, framework and lens, and you're always trying to look at things from another point of view. And so, what is your own bias when you look at sort of a certain subject, or, what was happening at the time, and, those sorts of things I think are really useful disciplines to take into the workforce.
Yeah. So that was one of the things I remember reading Renee say it, is that it talked about, what you mentioned there about being able to understand, from learning from the past, understand how things are going to play out. But it's also something about I think it was something along forming your debate, forming your
so debating skills, and just, well, not so much debating as a way that lawyers learn to debate, but in terms of forming arguments and being able to say, I can take a whole set of information and I can probably write up the argument in either direction reasonably, or back in the day very well. But I think being able to distill an argument to something that's simple to understand is a really useful skill. I found it's been very helpful for my career.
Yeah. Very cool. I'll let you know, as you're a bit of a history person, when I went to school, and the rector or the principal did the interview, and I didn't want to learn another language, and I didn't want to know anything about history, right? So my mum's a CIO. I was all tech focused, and I don't want to know about history. That's the past. I want to know about the future. And interestingly, the 2 things I love the most are learning languages and learning about history now. So, but it took...
All these books behind me aren't mine. They're my husband's, because he didn't read a book at university, and then he's been reading ever since. Whereas, like I did, I read lots of books at university, and I'm done. But it makes me look cerebral having it in the background.
It does. It's a very cool background. I was actually going to ask you before whether it was a real background or a photo background, but I sort of noticed there was none of the edge stuff happening, so I thought it must be pretty real. But okay, so I'll share my favorite piece of history is Rome, and not just the gladiators, but the whole picture of Rome. Like, how could they be so advanced in their civilization? And then we go back in time almost as we go through medieval time. They had all this amazing stuff back then, but then it gets lost. What's your favorite part of history, and why?
Wow, that's a question I wasn't expecting. I spent a lot of my history degree actually in the 20th century, which isn't very far away. But I spent a lot of time looking at, the partition of India and Malaya and Burma in the 1940s, the impact of nationalism, and when people start, countries start to form and so forth, and what that means, the impact of, decisions made from people who don't know things well, and the incredible impact, if you look at partition in India and, how many people died through that, and how you've just got sort of English people just drawing lines through maps and so forth. It's fascinating and devastating at the same time.
Yeah, I watched an interesting movie, and this comes back to what got me interested in history, Braveheart. So I watched Braveheart, and I came to work when I was as an art director, and we had a elderly Scottish guy who was just coming toward the end of his career, Bob, and he was actually a cartoonist / graphic artist, and he used to draw these crazy cartoons. And because he's Scottish, I said, "Wow, I saw Braveheart last night. Is that real?" And he's like, "Oh, I won't do his accent, but it was the stereotypical accent." And he said, "Oh yeah, that was a Hollywood version of it, but there's some pretty true facts in there that it's all based on, but still a little bit of Hollywood to it." But I was absolutely enthralled by it. It really lit my mind up. So of course, as you might expect, the movie Gladiator with Russell Crowe, again, got things going. So. Coming back. So with you're talking about India and the division of India. There's a movie out just now. I don't know if it was Netflix or Sky, but there's an amazing movie about that whole situation. With
the governor's house or something. I remember watching a movie at the cinema a few years ago that was all about that time, and it was pretty sad, to be honest.
I had a feeling it was a new movie. I could be wrong, but it's about. So let me see if I can. So it's about the East India Trading Company and the wars between the separate, I guess, almost like families that were, say, the royal family of each province or area of India, and the creation of the, I guess, mythical character. I hope I don't say that wrong and offend anyone from India. But the Rani, who was the wife of the male figure. But very interesting, colourful. So we're just coming up on the close here, and what I wanted to do was to ask you, with all the different things that you've experienced, what advice would you give to other women? You might have different advice for young women, to women your age, or so you might, but whatever you choose, what would be the advice you'd give to someone who's looking up, going, "I'd really like to be a CEO. I think I could make a difference," but is thinking potentially, just not because they're a woman, but just thinking, "Oh, I don't know if I could do it." What would be your advice?
Well, I would say, one, I don't think I ever thought to myself early, much beyond about a year ago, that I could possibly ever consider doing it either. So I think it takes a long time to crystallize in your mind that it's something you might even be capable of doing. So I think if you're early on in your career, I think, and you would have heard this from other places, but you should be pursuing things that you enjoy and you love. I did make a couple of moves in my early 30s to try and create more flexibility, so that I started off in investment banking, and the hours there are pretty brutal. And I think I realized that there was no way that I could mix motherhood and a career like that. And so I started making these sort of steps towards a more corporate career, which I thought was going to be less sort of, I think if you're on the sales side selling services to people and you're always on call, and there's lots of, amazing careers in that side, you're going to be always a little bit at the mercy of your clients. And that is really, really hard as a woman. And you can see that all over. I had a friend who's sort of, worked in an ad agency, who was working crazy hours during the first lockdown. You can see it in law firms. You can see it all over the place, where you're meeting other people's deadlines, and that can be brutal. So I think, for me, going inside of a corporate, and that started at New Zealand Post, was a good first step into saying, well, my hours and my deadlines are more my own. But I think just sort of finding something that you enjoy and working hard. And I don't think, I've ever looked more than, I don't know, I've never had a grand plan of 5 to 10 years or something. I've just kind of said, well, what's this like? And is it working for me now? Is this interesting? And I did, I think, a little bit of quite a lot of lateral moves in my 30s, rather than just going, finance can be very niche. which is where I came from. And I did know people who were in their 40s and 50s who were very, very well paid at jobs that they were very bored with. And I think I said this once about a year ago, but I didn't enter finance to be bored. I mean, that's just generally what, you get there to be stimulated by all sorts of exciting things that are going on. So for me, I've done a lot of like, well, how can I go out to the side and find out, how can I do things that way? And I've become really interested in people management as well. I really, I think at this stage as a CEO, I actually get my hands on the tools very little. And I think going back all the way to that conversation about juggling and motherhood and all the rest of it, I delegate like crazy. And I trust my people. I mean, so I do it for both my own sanity and for their own sanity. So, get good people around you, be clear about what they need to do, and then get out of their way. And so I do. I get a lot of kickback from Craig Ward. Actually, he calls me a figurehead. He's very rude to me, but to a certain extent, I am. He's like, "Oh, how's the figurehead going today?"
Oh, really? So
Yeah.
that's a bit of that's meant and said.
He's teasing me. He's teasing me. But how much do I do on a day-to-day? There are very few things that I actually go off. Like all the things that the teams have done recently, it's not by me coming in and doing it for them. And if I did, it would be much worse than if I just leave them to get on with it. The last thing you need is me meddling.
So on that note, I was actually, when you said, I delegate as what did you actually say? I delegate everything. I delegate as much as I can, or delegate where I can.
Yeah.
So, an interesting thing I was just going to ask you is, how do you get used to it? So the context of that story is I have run my own business for 13 years, and due to family health matters, as I got going, I got dragged back. So never quite got going, but now have 5 contractors.
Yeah.
And I went through this little moment of like, I've got to give I'm a former award-winning art director when I was 20 back at it. I'm like, I've now got to hand this off to another designer. It's different to how I would have done it. I don't like. So then I realized that I was like, just let it go. And got some stuff back. I was like, wow, that's amazing. And that was like the sort of tipping point for me. And then I went, hang on, it used to take me 4 hours to move a thing about this far, because I'd be like, oh, I don't like it. And I move it. And now it's like, I ship it off. It comes back looking amazing. But that pain of going, I'm relinquishing this to you, do you have any insights around how to deal with that? You have 200 people that you relinquish that trust to. Any lessons for us?
Oh, goodness. I mean, it's a learning process. I'm sure there are people who've worked for me in the past sort of shaking their heads at this stage, especially when they do things. I'm like, oh, I wouldn't have done it like that. But I think it's actually almost easier now as CEO because there are so many areas of the business that I have never done. And that's the other interesting thing is how much trust I need to have in the team below me because I can't do some of these jobs and I haven't come through that stream. So you get really at that very general level. But gosh, I think, in general, whenever I share things out and I kind of relinquish control, the answer is always better, I think. And I relearn that lesson on almost a weekly, daily basis, that sometimes I hold things really tight and I don't want to share because I also don't want to be told it's not good. And so by opening it up, you're sort of saying, oh, how can you make something better? How can, and you're admitting it, you can't do it all by yourself. But whenever I kind of get through that moment and I do that, I'm always just amazed about how much better it is when, you've had other people help you. And so you've got to keep that sort of aim in mind. And for you, for example, if you've got 5 people now working for you, you're going to achieve so much more together as a team of 6 than you ever could by yourself. And I think you've got to keep that in mind.
Yep. That's a really good point. Thank you so much for that. So, hey, I realize I have kept you over time and I hope you probably would have raised if you had a urgent thing to get to. So what I wanted to do is just do a little bit of a summary and then giving you some time to collect your thoughts for your closing remarks. So closing remarks. What would you like to share with the audience? And of course, a little bit something specific for women, but also to the open audience as well. And just to do a bit of a summary, we've been talking to Rhiannon McKinnon, who's the CEO of Kiwi Wealth, started the role in February-ish, March-ish. Excuse me if I got the month wrong. You can correct me in a moment. coming from part-time, and did the role part-time for a while before going full-time. But as a woman who's a CEO of a financial institution, which is very historically, traditionally, stereotypically a male-dominated space. My wife worked in banking for 20 years, 20 plus years. So I have seen it. I have, I didn't really talk about this side of it, but, we're at the after-work drinks and a senior manager kissed her on the back of the neck. Yes. Not a wise move to do in front of Ryan the Lion, but it was a fun thing, not a dirty or weird thing. But all those sorts of things that can happen. We didn't quite touch on those. But coming back to you, talking about your background, having studied history, and that was your path through into a financial intern back in the UK, and giving you a grounding and forming your argument, and being able to see how things would play out. And of course, in this environment, that's probably the soft skills that we talk about today being so important. And of course, being a mother of 3 under 8, if I get them right, it's 3, 5, and 7.
Yeah, they were once. Yeah, I think some of them are older now, but yeah, absolutely. 3, 5, and 7 when I took the role.
Yeah. And having a family of 204, with 200 being with Kiwi Wealth, and the other 4 being obviously your 3 kids and your lovely husband, who I jokingly said might be worth 3 people if he's like me. My wife would definitely say that was the case. So it's been a pleasure getting to hear all about this for you, and some of the insights and lessons that were shared over time. So now, if you'd like to share your closing remarks, what would you like to say to people?
I think what I would like to say, I don't think we've touched on it so much, is I think for women, I think, it's great to hear inspiring stories, but I think everyone has to be really clear about what's important to them. So, I'm sort of doing this CE job at the moment, and I constantly reevaluate, have I got my balance right? Have I got enough time with my kids? Is this the right thing to do? But everyone's, what's important to them is different. And there are lots of mums who stay at home for 20 years or 5 years or whatever it might be. They're all good choices, but they need to be choices if you can, and you've all got your own limitations and context, but as much as they can be for you. And it's noisy out there. There are so many things that you can read about these incredible women. And I think women sometimes look at that and go, oh, why is that not me? Or like, I'm not achieving enough. And the point is, everyone is achieving enough. Just make your own choices in terms of what you think is important and stick by them. And that can be hard because there's so many things coming at you. So that's really my closing remarks. Not everyone needs to do this. Just do what feels right for your family and what's right for you. And that might be working, 12 hours a week, 40 hours a week. But it is, if you can choose it, if you have that ability, do it for you and not for what you think other people think you should be doing.
Awesome advice. Really cool. I always can't help myself because I'm a bit of an over talker, but I was pushed into science, maths, and physics, and I was meant to become a doctor, and all I wanted to do was art. And I dropped out of uni and went to become an art director, and as I mentioned before, jokingly, become an award-winning art director as part of a team, not solely by myself, and had some great achievements. And my advice to people is follow your own path, which is what have I got here? Do what is important to you, which would have been my art, and make your choices and stick to them. So absolutely beautiful advice, because we can't all be the CEO of Kiwi Wealth.
Hopefully just one at a time.
Someone put that. So congratulations. And I just want to finish off by saying, and look, we've got I like it when this happens. So Carolyn Gibby is just said, congratulations, love what you've achieved. And if I go right back to the beginning, because she might be dropping in and out from the UK, is your friend Sarah Furness. Hello.
Nice to see you. So, that's another powerful, amazing woman.
Yes, I saw, and I don't know if you saw the chat, but I popped a wee message back to her, and we've been having chats. So you might be able to see a future speaker that you know as well.
Awesome. Right.
If you don't mind, I'd just like to address the fact that I'm going to put it this way, if you don't mind. Some fool has trolled our YouTube account and just put in really stupid sexist comments. And it just reinforces why we do these interviews. And we've been through over the years the discussions, all the different discussions around, well, why do we need to do this? And I remember getting trolled by another person who said, you don't need to do this. My wife is more than happy and capable of standing on her own 2 feet, blah, 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 blah. And I responded to him saying, well, why didn't your wife write the message? But the point is, there's a problem and it needs to be addressed, and it needs to be continually addressed until there is no problem. And then we won't have interviews that are titled Inspiring Women Leaders to encourage and give support and confidence to women to give it a go. If you're on the precipice thinking, do I, don't I? And you get some asshole like the guy that's trolled the account, that might just deter you or be enough to. So we want to be here to always reinforce, but we want more amazing Rhiannons, Jolies, Justines, and the like. And whatever you choose to do, whatever is important to you as the advice from Rhiannon is the best thing that you can do. And we applaud you for doing that. And don't let anybody, any sexist arsehole, ever step in your way. If they do, my number is 021 419 202, and I'll be right there to support you. So with that, I want to bring it back to you, because I want to thank you for everything you've shared, and give the 3 kids and the hubby a hug for us. And congrats on everything that you've achieved. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Cheers. All right, mate. Talk to you
Bye.
soon.